The road stretched out like a dusty ribbon across the vast Colorado territory, endless and unforgiving under the scorching July sun of 1877. Clara Winters watched her 3 young sons trudging ahead of her, their small feet raw and blistered from walking barefoot through the parched earth. Each wincing step they took tore at her heart more than the grief she'd been carrying since burying her husband 2 months prior. "Just a little further, boys," she called out, adjusting the worn leather satchel containing everything they had left in the world. Her voice cracked from thirst, the water canteen having run dry hours ago. 8-year-old Samuel, the eldest, glanced back with eyes too serious for a child. 6-year-old Henry trudged beside him, clutching his younger brother's hand. 4-year-old James, the baby of the family, had stopped crying hours ago, his energy spent from the relentless journey. They were 3 days out from the burned remnants of their homestead, heading toward the distant promise of her cousin's ranch in Crystal Creek. Clara had heard rumors of work there, of a new beginning away from the charred memories of the life she'd built with Thomas before the fever took him. The distant sound of hoofbeats made Clara instinctively gather her sons closer. Travelers could mean help or danger, and with 3 small boys to protect, she couldn't afford to take chances. A plume of dust rose in the distance, gradually forming into the shape of a rider approaching at a steady pace. Clara tensed, one hand protectively on Samuel's shoulder, the other reaching for the small knife hidden in the folds of her skirt. The rider slowed as he approached, a tall figure atop a chestnut stallion. The horse's coat gleamed copper in the late afternoon light, its muscled form suggesting good care despite the harsh conditions. "Afternoon, madam," the stranger called, tipping his hat. He kept a respectful distance, seemingly aware of her wariness. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but Clara caught glimpses of a strong jaw lined with a neatly trimmed beard. "Afternoon," Clara replied cautiously, her hand not moving from the hidden knife. The stranger's gaze drifted to the boys, taking in their dirty faces and bare, dust-covered feet. Something shifted in his expression, not pity, Clara noted with relief, but a quiet understanding. "My name's August Reed," he said, dismounting with fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "Heading to Crystal Creek with supplies." He gestured to the pack horse trailing behind him that Clara hadn't noticed before. "We're bound for Crystal Creek as well," Clara offered cautiously. "My cousin has a ranch there." August nodded, his eyes lingering on the boy's feet. The smallest child was now leaning heavily against his mother's skirts, exhaustion evident in his tiny frame. "Your sons are walking barefoot through the dust," he observed, his voice gentle. He reached for one of his saddlebags and pulled out several pairs of leather boots in varying sizes. "I've got boots for all," he said simply. "Was taking these to sell in town, but seems to me they're needed more urgently here." Clara stiffened, pride warring with necessity. "We can't accept charity, Mr. Reed." "Not charity, madam. Just kindness between travelers." His eyes met hers directly for the first time, and Clara was struck by their colored deep blue, like the sky just before dusk. "And it's August, if you don't mind." Before Clara could respond, Samuel stepped forward. "Thank you, sir," he said solemnly, his young voice carrying the weight of a child forced to grow up too quickly. August smiled, crouching down to help the boys try on the boots. "Let's see if we can find the right sizes for you brave young men." As Clara watched this stranger gently slide boots onto her son's raw feet, something in her chest loosened a small knot of the tension she'd been carrying since Thomas drew his last breath. It wasn't just the practical help, though heaven knew they needed it desperately. It was the simple human kindness, offered without expectation. "I'm Clara Winters," she said finally. "These are my sons Samuel, Henry, and James." August looked up from where he was adjusting a boot on James's small foot. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Winters. You and your boys look like you could use a rest and some food before continuing on." Clara hesitated, years of frontier weariness battling with exhaustion and the needs of her children. "Crystal Creek's still 15 miles east," August continued. "There's a creek about half a mile ahead where we could stop. Got coffee and jerky to share." The mention of food made all 3 boys look up hopefully. Clara realized it had been nearly a day since their last proper meal, hardtack, and the last of their salted pork. "That would be most appreciated," she conceded, unable to deny her children when help was being offered. As they walked toward the creek, James in his new boots taking experimental steps beside her, Clara studied August read from the corner of her eye. He led his horses with confident ease, occasionally pointing out interesting rocks or plants to the boys, who gradually warmed to his gentle manner. There was something solid about him, not just his tall frame and broad shoulders, but a steadiness that radiated from him. In a world that had recently proven itself chaotic and cruel, that steadiness felt like the first glimpse of solid ground after nearly drowning. The creek, when they reached it, was a modest but clear stream cutting through the arid landscape. A small stand of cottonwoods provided blessed shade, their leaves rustling in the faint breeze. August efficiently set about making camp with the practiced movements of a man accustomed to life on the trail. He unsaddled his horses, letting them drink before securing them where they could graze on the sparse grass nearby. Clara directed her sons to wash their hands and faces in the cool creek water, relief flooding through her as she watched them splash playfully for the first time in days. "Your boys seem like fine young men," August commented as he built a small fire. "Takes courage to make this journey." Clara nodded, sinking gratefully onto a flat rock near the fire. "They've had to grow up fast these past months. Their father." She trailed off, the familiar ache rising in her throat. "I'm sorry for your loss," August said quietly, not pressing for details. Clara appreciated his restraint. "Fever took him this spring. The farm couldn't support us without him, so we're heading to my cousin's ranch." She wrote that they need help with cooking and mending. August nodded, pouring coffee grounds into a battered pot. "Crystal Creek's growing. Good folks there, for the most part. You know it well. Run supplies through their regular. Got a small freight business, nothing fancy. Just me and my horses, but it keeps me moving." He glanced up with a slight smile. "And moving suits me fine." As the coffee brewed, August produced jerky, dried apples, and to the boys' delight, a small pouch of hard candies. They ate sitting in a circle, the lengthening shadows of evening bringing welcome coolness to the air. Clara watched as August patiently answered Samuel's earnest questions about his horses, showed Henry how to whittle a simple whistle from a cottonwood branch, and gently ruffled James's hair when the youngest boy fell asleep against his side, exhausted from the day's journey. There was an ease to him that Clara hadn't expected, not the rough-edged camaraderie of the frontier men she'd known, but something gentler, more thoughtful. His hands, though weathered and calloused from work, moved with surprising delicacy as he demonstrated whittling techniques to Henry. As darkness fell fully, Clara tucked her sons into their thin blankets near the fire. They fell asleep almost instantly, their new boots lined up neatly beside them. "Thank you," Clara said softly when she returned to the fire where August sat, feeding small branches into the flames. "Not just for the boots. For everything today." August nodded, his face partly shadowed in the firelight. "No need for thanks. Trail's hard enough without helping where we can." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the crackle of the fire and the distant chorus of night insects the only sounds. "How long have you been on your own?" Clara asked finally. August poked at the fire with a stick. "Going on 8 years now. Had a small place near Santa Fe once, but after my wife and daughter died in a typhoid outbreak, couldn't bear to stay." Clara's heart clenched at the matter-of-fact way he delivered this devastating information. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling inadequate. "Been a long time," he replied. "The road's been my home since. Keeps the memories at arm's length, most days." Clara recognized the grief that lingered beneath his words, not the raw, bleeding wound of her recent loss, but something that had scarred over, still tender but no longer debilitating. "Does it get easier?" she asked before she could stop herself. August looked at her directly, the firelight catching in his eyes. "Not easier. Different. You learn to carry it differently." He paused. "Those boys give you purpose. That helps." Clara nodded, glancing at her sleeping sons. "They're all I have left of him, of the life we built." "You're building them a new one," August observed. "Takes courage." "Or desperation," Clara countered with a wry smile. August chuckled softly. "Often the same thing out here." They talked late into the night, the kind of conversation that sometimes happens between strangers who have no shared past to navigate. August told her about the freight routes he traveled, the changes he'd witnessed as the territory developed, the characters he'd met along the way. Clara shared stories of her life before growing up in Missouri, meeting Thomas at a harvest dance, their journey west to claim land and build a future. When Clara finally wrapped herself in her blanket beside her sons, sleep came more easily than it had in months, the solid presence of their unexpected guardian keeping watch by the fire. Morning arrived with the first chirping of birds and the soft golden light of dawn. Clara woke to find August already up, tending to his horses and preparing a simple breakfast of coffee and johnny cakes cooked over the rekindled fire. "Thought we might ride double," he suggested as they ate. "Save your boys' feet, even with the new boots. Make it to Crystal Creek by nightfall." Clara hesitated, calculating. They'd been walking for days, making slow progress. The prospect of reaching their destination today instead of spending another night on the trail was tempting, especially with the boys' energy flagging. "That's very kind, but your horses?" "Arrow can carry too easy," August assured her, nodding toward the chestnut stallion. "And the pack horse can manage one of the boys with some of the load redistributed." The boys, overhearing this conversation, looked at their mother with hopeful expressions. "Can we, Ma?" Samuel asked, excitement breaking through his usual stoicism. "I've never ridden a real horse before." Clara smiled at her eldest son. "If Mr. Reed is sure it won't be too much trouble." "August," he corrected gently. "And no trouble at all." The journey that day passed in a blur of new experiences for Clara and her sons. Samuel rode proudly atop the pack horse, carefully following August's instructions on how to hold the reins. Henry and James took turns riding with August on Arrow, their small faces alight with wonder at being so high above the ground. Clara rode behind August when it was James's turn to sit up front. The closeness was unavoidable, her arms lightly around August's waist for balance, the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them, the smell of leather and sunshine that seemed to emanate from him. It was the closest she'd been to a man since Thomas, and though guilt flared briefly, it was quickly replaced by a simpler feeling, comfort. They stopped at midday by another small creek to rest the horses and eat a simple meal. August surprised them by producing fishing line and hooks from his saddlebags, showing the boys how to catch small trout from the deeper pools. The pride on Samuel's face when he caught a fish almost as long as his arm made Clara's heart swell. August showed him how to clean it properly, his hands guiding the boys' smaller ones with patient instruction. "You're good with them," Clara observed as they prepared to set off again, watching as August helped James back into his boots after wading in the shallows. August's expression softened. "They remind me of myself at that age, curious about everything." A shadow passed briefly over his face, and of what my Emma might have been like, had she grown. Clara touched his arm briefly before she could think better of it. How old was she? Just turned 4 when the fever took her and her mother. His voice was steady, but Clara saw the grief flash across his eyes. "James just turned 4 in May," Clara said softly. August nodded, his gaze lingering on the youngest boy. "I noticed the resemblance in spirit. That same determination." They continued on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they approached Crystal Creek. The flat plains gave way to gently rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen. In the distance, Clara caught glimpses of mountains, their peaks still holding patches of snow even in summer. "That's Settler's Ridge," August explained, pointing to a particularly distinctive peak. Crystal Creek's in the valley just beyond that foothill. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they crested a small rise, and the town of Crystal Creek spread out before them. It was larger than Clara had expected, perhaps 24 buildings along a main street, with homesteads and small ranches dotting the surrounding countryside. "Which ranch belongs to your cousin?" August asked as they descended toward the town. "The Double S," she wrote. "For Stevenson," Clara replied. "Should be north of town, about 3 miles. August nodded. "Know it well." "Good spread, though they've had some troubles lately." Clara looked at him sharply. "What kind of troubles?" August seemed to choose his words carefully. "Nothing for you to worry about right now. But the territory's changing. Railroads coming, big cattle operations moving in. Makes things complicated for smaller ranches." Before Clara could press for details, James pointed excitedly. "Look, Ma, a real town." They rode down the main street of Crystal Creek as the evening activity was beginning to pick up. Men stood in small groups outside the saloon. A few families moved between the general store and other businesses, and a stagecoach was just pulling away from what appeared to be a small hotel. Clara felt a prickle of self-consciousness as people turned to look at the newcomers. Her dress was travel-stained, her hair hastily pinned under her bonnet. The boys, despite their new boots, were dusty and rumpled from the journey. "Don't mind them," August said quietly, seeming to sense her discomfort. "Just curious about new faces." They continued through town and headed north along a well-traveled road. After about 3 miles, they approached a ranch entrance marked by a wooden arch bearing a branded double S. A modestly sized ranch house stood about 100 yards from the road, with a barn, corral, and several outbuildings nearby. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the setting sun. "That's Sarah," Clara said, recognizing her cousin despite the years since they'd last seen each other. She felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as they drew closer. What if Sarah's invitation had been mere politeness? What if there wasn't really work for her? What if— "Clara? Is that you?" Sarah called, hurrying toward them. She was a few years older than Clara, her once auburn hair now streaked with gray, her face lined but kind. August helped Clara down from the horse, his hands steady at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her that she quickly pushed aside. "Sarah," Clara said, stepping forward to embrace her cousin. "Thank you for taking us in." Sarah returned the embrace tightly. "Family helps family." "I'm just sorry to hear about Thomas." She pulled back to look at the boys. "And these must be your fine sons." As Clara made introductions, a tall man with a weathered face approached from the direction of the barn. "August Reed," he greeted, extending his hand. "Didn't expect to see you till next month." "Change of plans, Adam," August replied, clasping the man's hand. "Met Mrs. Winters and her boys on the trail, heading your way." Adam Stevenson turned to Clara with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Double S, Mrs. Winters. Sarah's been talking of nothing else since your letter arrived." Clara felt tears of relief threatening. "Thank you for having us. Let's get you all settled," Sarah said, noticing the children's exhaustion. "You must be starving after your journey." As they walked toward the house, Clara glanced back at August, who remained by his horses. "Will you join us?" she asked, surprising herself with how much she wanted him to stay. August shook his head. "Best get back to town before full dark. Got deliveries to make tomorrow." Clara felt a pang of disappointment she knew was unreasonable. This kind stranger had already done more than most would, bringing them safely to their destination. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." August tipped his hat. "My pleasure, Mrs. Winters." His eyes met hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Perhaps I'll see you around Crystal Creek." As he mounted Arrow and turned back toward town, Clara watched him go with mixed emotions. Relief at reaching their destination safely warred with an unexpected sense of loss. In the space of a day, August Reed had become a fixed point in their uncertain world, a glimpse of kindness when they'd needed it most. "He seems like a good man," Sarah commented, coming to stand beside Clara. "He is," Clara agreed. "We wouldn't have made it here so quickly without his help." Sarah studied her cousin's face with knowing eyes. "August passes through regular with supplies. You'll likely see him again." Clara nodded, turning toward the house where her sons were already being ushered inside by Adam. "Yes, I suppose we will." The Stevenson Ranch became their new home, and Clara quickly settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Sarah with cooking, cleaning, and mending for the ranch hands, while the boys found their place among the children of neighboring homesteads who gathered for informal schooling 3 days a week. The Double S was a modest operation compared to some of the larger spreads in the territory, but Adam ran it efficiently with the help of 4 hired hands. They raised cattle on the grasslands to the north and grew enough crops to sustain themselves with some left over to sell in town. As August had hinted, the ranch faced challenges. The railroad was pushing through 30 miles south, bringing with it land speculators and larger cattle operations. Water rights were becoming contentious as more settlers arrived, and the old ways of open-range grazing were giving way to fenced properties and more formal boundaries. Clara learned all this gradually over her first weeks at the ranch. She also learned that August Reed was well regarded in Crystal Creek, known for his reliability, fair dealing, and tendency to help those in need without making a fuss about it. He's something of a local fixture, Sarah explained as they kneaded bread dough one morning. Shows up every few weeks with supplies, stays a day or two, then heads out again. Been doing it for years. Does he have family somewhere? Clara asked, trying to sound merely conversational. Sarah shook her head. Not that anyone knows of. Keeps to himself mostly, though he's friendly enough. She gave Clara a sidelong glance. He's never brought a family to their destination before, though. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. We were fortunate he came along when he did. Sarah smiled knowingly, but didn't press further. 3 weeks after their arrival, Clara took the boys into town for supplies. Samuel had taken to ranch life with enthusiasm, shadowing Adam and the hands whenever they'd let him. Henry had discovered a talent for working with the chickens and other small livestock, while James had become Sarah's little helper in the kitchen garden. The transformation in her sons from the exhausted, dusty children who had trudged barefoot along the trail to these energetic, purpose-filled boys sometimes took Clara's breath away. They weren't whole, they still asked for their father sometimes, still had nightmares, but they were healing, finding their way in this new life. Crystal Creek on market day was bustling with activity. Farmers and ranchers from the surrounding area came to sell their goods and purchase supplies, creating a lively atmosphere in the normally quiet town. Clara had just finished selecting fabric at the general store when Samuel tugged at her sleeve. "Ma, look, it's Mr. Reed." Clara turned to see August dismounting from Arrow outside the store. He looked much as he had the day they'd met, trail-worn but neat, his beard trimmed, his movements easy and confident. The sight of him caused an unexpected flutter in her chest that Clara firmly tamped down. "So it is," she replied evenly. "Why don't we say hello and thank him again for his help?" The boys raced ahead before she could stop them. August turned at their approach, a genuine smile breaking across his face as he recognized them. "Well, if it isn't the Winters boys," he greeted, crouching down to their level. "Those boots treating you well?" "Yes, sir," Henry answered enthusiastically. "I help with the chickens now, and the boots keep my feet dry when it's muddy. And I can ride ponies now," James added importantly. "Mr. Adam is teaching me." August glanced up as Clara approached, and the warmth in his eyes made her momentarily forget what she'd planned to say. "Mrs. Winters," he said, straightening. "You're looking well." "As are you, Mr. Reed," she replied. "Back in Crystal Creek for supplies?" He nodded. "Just arrived. Heading out tomorrow for Denver, then back this way in about 2 weeks." The conversation might have ended their polite pleasantries exchanged between acquaintances, but James suddenly piped up. "Ma says we owe you a proper meal for helping us. Don't we, Ma?" Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks at her son's directness. "James, that's not exactly, I'd be honored," August interrupted, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "If the invitation stands." Clara found herself nodding before she could think better of it. "Of course. Sarah and Adam would be pleased to have you. Perhaps when you return from Denver?" "I'll look forward to it," August replied, his gaze holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. As they parted ways, Clara scolded herself for the schoolgirl flutter in her stomach. She was a widow with 3 children, not some young girl with time for romantic notions. August had been kind to them, nothing more. Still, she found herself looking forward to his return with an anticipation that surprised her. The invitation for dinner turned into something more. When August returned from Denver 2 weeks later, he brought not only supplies for the local merchants, but small gifts for the Winters boys: a wooden horse for James, a small pocket knife for Henry, and a book about explorers for Samuel. "You shouldn't have," Clara protested when he presented them at the ranch that evening. August shrugged, looking almost shy, saw them and thought of the boys. Nothing fancy, but the thoughtfulness of the gestures, each gift perfectly suited to each child's emerging interests, touched Clara deeply. Dinner at the Stevenson Ranch that night was a lively affair. Sarah had prepared a feast of roast chicken, potatoes, fresh vegetables from the garden, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with August sharing news from Denver and stories from his travels that had the boys hanging on his every word. Clara found herself watching him throughout the meal, the animated way he spoke with his hands when describing a particularly dramatic river crossing, the gentle patience with which he answered James's endless questions, the respectful attention he gave to Adam's concerns about cattle prices. After dinner, As Sarah and Clara cleared the dishes, August helped Adam bring in more firewood. The August evening had turned cool, and the crackling fire in the hearth added a cozy warmth to the main room. "Would you play for us, Clara?" Sarah asked, gesturing to the small piano in the corner. "It's been too long since we've had music in this house." Clara hesitated. She hadn't played since before Thomas died, the joy of music seeming to have died with him. "Please, Ma," Samuel asked, "like you used to." Something in her son's request, the memory of happier times, perhaps made Clara nod. She sat at the piano, fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys before beginning a simple folk tune. The music came back to her gradually, rusty at first, then flowing more naturally as she remembered the pleasure it had once given her. When she finished the first song, she moved seamlessly into another, then another. When she finally stopped and turned on the bench, she found August watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between admiration and wistfulness. "That was beautiful, Mrs. Winters," he said quietly. "Clara," she corrected, surprising herself. "After all we've been through, I think you can call me Clara." A slow smile spread across his face. "Clara, then." As the evening drew to a close, August prepared to leave for his lodgings in town. The boys, despite protests, had been sent to bed, and Adam and Sarah had tactfully retired to their room, leaving Clara to walk August to his horse. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark sky like diamond dust. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and late summer wildflowers. "Thank you for coming," Clara said as they reached Arrow, who nickered softly in greeting to his master. "Thank you for having me," August replied, making no immediate move to mount. "It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a family dinner like that." Clara nodded, understanding the loneliness behind his words. "You're welcome anytime. The boys would love it." She paused. "And so would I." August studied her face in the moonlight. "I'm headed to Santa Fe next week. Be gone about a month." He hesitated. "But I'd like to call on you proper when I return, if that would be acceptable." Clara felt her heart quicken. "I'd like that very much." August reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished, and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Until then, Clara Winters," he said softly, bringing her hand briefly to his lips in a gesture that belonged to an earlier, more formal time. As she watched him ride away, Clara acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling for August Reed, his quiet strength, his kindness to her sons, the depth of character that showed in everything he did. The realization both frightened and exhilarated her. She hadn't expected to feel this way again, hadn't been looking for it. Yet here it was, unfurling within her like a flower turning toward unexpected sunshine. The month of August's absence stretched longer than Clara had anticipated. She threw herself into work helping with the harvest, preserving vegetables for winter, sewing new clothes for her growing boys. But thoughts of August were never far away, especially when the boys would casually mention him in conversation. "Do you think Mr. Reed has been to California, Ma?" Samuel would ask over breakfast. "When Mr. Reed comes back, can he teach me more about horses?" Henry would wonder as they collected eggs. "I'm saving my best drawing for Mr. Reed," James would announce, proudly displaying a colorful rendering of what might have been a horse or possibly a large dog. Clara tried to temper their expectations and her own. "Mr. Reed travels for his work, boys. He might not have much time to visit when he passes through." But when August returned in early October, it became clear that making time for the Winters family was exactly what he intended to do. He arrived at the Double S one crisp autumn afternoon, Arrow's saddlebags laden with small treasures from his journey: exotic spices for Clara, a beautiful woven blanket for Sarah, tobacco for Adam, and of course, small gifts for the boys. "You must stop bringing gifts every time," Clara admonished gently as they walked along the creek that ran behind the ranch house. The boys had run ahead, eager to show August a fort they'd built among the cottonwoods. "Can't help myself," August admitted with a smile. "Haven't had people to bring things to in a long time." The simple honesty of his statement touched Clara deeply. "Well, you do now," she said softly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of the growing connection that neither had expected but both now cherished. Over the next months, August adjusted his freight routes to pass through Crystal Creek more frequently. What had once been monthly visits became bi-weekly, each time with a few days stay in town. And each time, he would spend at least one evening at the Double S. He began teaching Samuel about tracking and wilderness survival, skills the boy absorbed with solemn dedication. He helped Henry construct a better chicken coop, showing patience when the boy's enthusiasm outpaced his carpentry skills. And he would sit for hours with James, listening to the 4-year-old's elaborate stories and responding with appropriate wonder. Clara watched all this with growing affection and, if she was honest with herself, love. August slipped into their lives so naturally, filling spaces they hadn't even realized were empty. Not replacing Thomas, nothing could or should do that, but creating something new, something unexpected and precious. As winter approached, bringing with it the first snows, August's visits necessarily became less frequent. The mountain passes grew treacherous, limiting travel to essential journeys. "I'll be wintering in town this year," he told Clara during his November visit. They were walking alone along the edge of the ranch property, the boys having been enlisted by Adam to help with indoor repairs. "Not heading south?" Clara asked, surprised. In previous conversations, August had mentioned spending winters in southern territories where travel remained possible. August shook his head, his breath visible in the cold air. "Not this year." His eyes met hers. "Got reasons to stay closer." Clara felt warmth spread through her despite the chill. "I'm glad," she said simply. Their relationship progressed slowly, respectfully. August was careful to court her properly, mindful of her status as a widow still grieving. He would bring small gifts, take her for walks when weather permitted, and always showed genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. By Christmas, it was clear to everyone at the Double S that August Reed was courting Clara Winters with serious intentions. The boys had accepted him completely, running to greet him whenever he appeared at the ranch, proudly showing him their accomplishments, seeking his approval and guidance. On Christmas Eve, after the boys had finally fallen asleep, excited about the simple gifts that would await them in the morning, August asked Clara to step outside with him. The night was clear and bitterly cold, stars sharp as icicles against the black sky. August had brought a thick blanket, which he wrapped around Clara's shoulders as they stood on the porch. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. Not quite a Christmas gift. He produced a small wooden box, simply but beautifully carved with a pattern of intertwined vines. "I made this," he explained, almost shy, "during the evenings in town." Clara took the box, touched by the evident care that had gone into its creation. When she opened it, she found a delicate silver ring inside, set with a small but perfect blue stone that caught the starlight. "It was my mother's," August said quietly. "The only thing I kept when I sold everything else and took to the road." Clara looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," August continued, his voice steady despite the emotion Clara could see in his eyes. "I know it's soon, and your boys come first. But I want you to know my intentions are honorable, and my feelings are true." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Clara Winters, and I love your sons as if they were my own." Tears filled Clara's eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. "August, you don't need to say anything now," he assured her quickly. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." Clara closed the box carefully and pressed it back into his hand. For a moment, disappointment flashed across August's face until Clara spoke. "Ask me properly," she whispered. "I don't need time." Understanding dawned in August's eyes. Carefully, he lowered himself to one knee in the snow, looking up at Clara with an expression of such hope and love that it took her breath away. "Clara Winters, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Clara answered without hesitation. "Yes, August Reed, I will marry you." His smile was brighter than all the stars above as he rose and slipped the ring onto her finger. When he gathered her into his arms, their kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with the promise of all they would build together. The wedding took place in early April 1878, when the worst of winter had passed and the first wildflowers were beginning to appear in the meadows around Crystal Creek. It was a simple ceremony in the small church in town, attended by the Stevensons, a few neighbors from surrounding ranches, and various townspeople who had come to know and respect both August and Clara. Samuel, Henry, and James stood proudly beside their mother and soon-to-be stepfather, all three boys dressed in new suits for the occasion. When the minister asked who gave this woman in marriage, it was Samuel who stepped forward solemnly and said, "Her sons do, sir." There wasn't a dry eye in the church at that moment, least of all August's, who knelt briefly to embrace the boy before turning to take Clara's hands in his. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with deep conviction, each word weighted with the understanding of all they had survived to reach this point. When August slipped the silver ring onto Clara's finger permanently, she felt as though a circle had been completed, not erasing the past, but honoring it while embracing the future. The small reception afterward at the Stevenson Ranch was filled with laughter, music, and the kind of genuine good wishes that come from a community that had watched this love story unfold with collective approval. "What happens now?" Sarah asked as she helped Clara change from her wedding dress into a simpler traveling outfit. August had been mysterious about their honeymoon plans, telling Clara only to pack for a week away. "August has purchased land," Clara revealed, excitement coloring her voice. "About 5 miles east of here, with good water access and grazing land. He's been working on a house there for months. That's what all those supply runs to town were really about." Sarah laughed in delight. "You mean he's giving up the road?" Clara nodded. "Not entirely. He'll still make runs to Denver and other larger towns seasonally. But he's starting a horse breeding operation here. Says it's time to put down roots again. And the boys, they're thrilled. Samuel's already planning how he'll help with the horses. Henry's designing a chicken coop better than yours," Clara teased. "And James is just excited about having his own room in the new house." When August and Clara departed that afternoon in a wagon loaded with their few possessions and 3 excited boys, the entire wedding party accompanied them to the turnoff that led to their new property. As the others waved goodbye, August guided the wagon down a well-maintained track that wound through stands of aspen and pine before opening into a beautiful valley sheltered by low hills. A creek, a tributary of the one that ran through the Stevenson property, cut through the eastern edge of the land. And there, situated on a small rise overlooking the valley, stood a house. Not a cabin or a shack, but a proper 2-story home with a wide porch wrapping around the front and one side. A barn and corral stood nearby, and the beginnings of a garden were visible at the side of the house. Clara gasped in surprise. "August, it's beautiful." The boys were already scrambling to get down from the wagon, eager to explore their new home. "Wait for us," August called, bringing the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He turned to Clara with a smile that held all his love for her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed." Before she could respond, he had jumped down and come around to her side of the wagon. In one smooth motion, he lifted her into his arms. "August," Clara laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he replied with mock seriousness. "It's tradition." As he carried her up the steps and across the porch, the boys dancing excitedly around them, Clara felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where they were meant to be, not just in this house, but together, this unexpected family forged from loss and chance meetings and boots offered to barefoot children on a dusty trail. August paused at the door, looking down at Clara with an expression of such tenderness it brought tears to her eyes. "Ready?" he asked softly. Clara touched his face, the face that had become dearer to her than she could have imagined possible a year ago. "Ready," she whispered. Together, they crossed the threshold into their new life. The years that followed brought challenges, as all lives do, but also abundant joy. The Reed Horse Ranch prospered, with August's knowledge of quality stock and fair trading earning them a reputation that spread throughout the territory. Clara established a small school on their property, teaching not only her own sons, but neighboring children as well. Samuel, at 16, became August's right hand in the horse business, showing a natural gift for working with even the most difficult animals. Henry developed his own talents in carpentry and building, his hands always busy creating or improving something around the ranch. James, still the dreamer of the family, filled notebooks with stories and drawings, his imagination as vivid as ever. And there were additions to the family: twin girls, Abigail and Alice, born 2 years after August and Clara's wedding, and later, a surprise last child, Thomas August Reed, named in honor of both the father the older boys had lost and the father who had chosen them. On warm summer evenings, the extended Reed family often gathered on the wide porch of the main house. August and Clara would sit side by side in rocking chairs, watching their children play in the yard or help with evening chores, their hands often linked between them. "Did I ever tell you?" August said one such evening, as the setting sun painted the valley in gold and crimson, "that the moment I saw you on that trail, with your 3 boys walking barefoot through the dust, I felt something shift inside me, like something that had been broken for years suddenly started to mend." Clara squeezed his hand. "You never told me that part." August smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening lines earned from years of smiling at his wife and children. "I'd been carrying those boots to sell in Crystal Creek. But the minute I saw your boys, I knew exactly why I'd been carrying them all that time." "For us," Clara said softly. "For us," August agreed, though I had no idea then what us would become. Clara leaned over to kiss him gently. "I'm glad you said you had boots for all." August's arm slipped around her shoulders, drawing her closer as they watched their children against the backdrop of the home and life they'd built together. "Best words I ever spoke," he murmured against her hair. "Best chance I ever took." In the distance, their oldest sons were teaching the younger children how to lasso, their laughter carrying across the yard. The little girl's matching braids caught the last of the sunlight, and baby Thomas toddled determinedly after his siblings, unwilling to be left behind. It wasn't the life Clara had imagined when she'd set out on that dusty trail with her 3 sons and little Hope. It wasn't the life August had expected when grief had driven him to the endless road years before. It was better, richer, fuller, and more beautiful than either could have dreamed. A testament to how love can find us when we least expect it, often beginning with the simplest acts of kindness. Like a stranger offering boots to barefoot children walking through the dust,